We do have city manager. City manager?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is pertaining to the fiscal year 2016-2017 request for funding for Studio Channel Islands Art Center. Last year, the council awarded $29,650 to Channel Islands Art Center for a variety of free public programs to assist them with their program funding. Those program expenses included school field trips, First Saturday Open Studios and gallery receptions, annual holiday market, and Arts Alive. For these same programs, they are asking for an appropriation of $29,750. They have made some changes to how the money is spent between those various programs to account for the expenses through those programs. I do need to bring to your attention that the City Council will be starting its discussion on cultural arts funding starting November 16th. We'll be having a study session to kick off that issue and that discussion, and then it'll be referred to, I'm recommending it be referred to Policy Committee so that an appropriate policy can be drafted for how we account for cultural arts funding. However, given the timing of the events for Studio Channel Islands, they do have a winter event that they are requesting funding for, and typically we would be cutting them a check soon after that event to cover their expenses. That would not be the case if we were to hold off on funding them at this time. And so that'll be something you'll need to consider. However, it does seem as though their balance sheet indicates that they do have sufficient monies available to be able to make it through the winter season without funding being immediately available. This was not a budgeted expenditure. It was something that I did anticipate having to bring to you at this time without having it budgeted, specifically because the City Council did not, at the time this was awarded, did not see it as being a continuously budgeted award. And so it is coming back individually at this time. And that appropriation, if approved, would be for $29,750. It is a general fund expense.
Mr. Mayor. Comments? Mr. Bill Little?
Yes. I'm not sure that, but I recall the discussion. I'm not sure that we specifically talked about it as an ongoing expense, but we certainly, I believe the conversation was that we were looking at it as more than just a one-time deal. I mean, I certainly did. And thought it.
Yes, I believe that's true. However, I did not take direction as meaning that it would be budgeted without further discussion.
Well, that's why it's here tonight.
Correct.
Okay.
Other comments? Jan?
I have a couple of questions, and maybe I'll start with my comment. I think a city manager made the note that they do have sufficient funds to go forward, and for that reason I would like to see, perhaps suggest that we wait until after we have our discussion on the criteria we're going to use. And I will give you an example of what caught my attention when I was looking at it. I have no problem supporting their public programs, because as long as it's for the public, free, open to the general public, anyone can come, then those are the kind of things that we appropriately could fund. But the thing that caught my eye was when we went to the school field trips.
Can you tell us what page?
And let's see, which one was I looking at? It would be page 7. So when I went to the school field trips and looked at a total of 363 students served, I thought of the question I hear several of you ask every time we do our regular grant cycle, is how many students from Camarillo? And of those 363, only 51 of them come from schools within the city of Camarillo. So that kind of triggered my thought process as maybe it needs to be part of the discussion on whether that is one of the criteria is for this kind of grant. I know it is very much one for our normal grant cycle. So I call that to your attention. And the other couple of things that caught my eye was requesting that we pay for ABC licenses and beer. I'm not sure that's the appropriate thing for the city of Camarillo to be funding as well. So those were the two things that caught my eye and made me think perhaps this needs to be discussed first and then figure out exactly what we can fund and bring it back when we have a little more information.
Mr. Mayor?
Kevin?
Yeah, maybe it's a question for the city attorney, but when we receive some verbiage on this, the gift of public funds, was this be considered a gift of public funds?
No.
My understanding it was not.
Yeah, it would not be a gift of public funds. We did review this, and the public, what you need to do when you spend public money is have a public purpose, and based on our review of the matter, we've concluded that there is definitely a public purpose here in many ways. There's the cultural benefit, the educational benefit, and as well as the economic benefit that would arise from attracting customers to the area. So it was our conclusion that there is definitely a public purpose to the expenditure of these funds. The one question that's being asked is to what extent can there be some indication of the programs or expenses that could be paid for by these funds. And Councilmember McDonald has mentioned one. So if there was a way to ensure that the funds were being spent only on those public purposes that the council finds to be acceptable based on the standards that I've described, then that could be done in the form of a motion. If there's going to be an approval of this item, you could handle that, I believe, through the motion on the item, or if the will of the council was to bring it back to have more definitive answer on that, that could be done as well.
Jan, you were about to have any comments more about that? Bring it.
No, I just think those are the issues that I saw in looking at it. I'm more, I think they do great service, and I think from a cultural standpoint, it's a great asset to the city. There were just a couple of things I wasn't quite sure that should fall under our grant.
A lot of those outsider trips come from SOMAS.
Well, that's not in the city of Camarillo, last time I checked.
SOMAS is like our neighbor forever, that we've been part of it, to get into our high schools and everything else. Yes.
And Santa Rosa Tech School.
Yeah.
It's in the Pleasant Valley School District,
Is
not
it-
in
is
not
it-
in the city of Camarillo.
I know it, but when we talked about first aid kits or whatever, earthquake kits, and I brought up that they were not in the city, everybody said, hey, wait a minute, they're part of our school district. So I think if we're going to count them for one thing, we need to count them for the other
And
thing.
add 24 and 29 more. I was just also I'm hoping maybe this year, maybe if we talk about this, that we can get more of our students here in the city to participate in it. It's a great program, but, they've got schools from Oxnard and so forth. So.
But this is just a small part of the,
Yeah, very small.
Well, it's
the amount.
$2,400 that's the one program, their field trip program.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Little?
Well, first of all the kids at SOMAS generally would end up at Camarillo High School at some point in time. So I consider them just a feeder district to Camarillo. And the others, Santa Rosa, we've talked about, Santa Rosa Technical. So I think that they're pretty well inside the city. We could ask them to make a better effort to go after more students within the city itself, the city elementary schools that are there. But and I would think that if we could approve this, should approve it with the understanding that they would be subject to the guidelines that is developed by this council at a subsequent meeting. So
Would you like to make that a motion?
I'll make it a motion.
Just for clarification, before we go too far down that road, recognize that the council will not have put together a policy before their first event is complete. And so their holiday market, for example, would be their first event. What we did last year is we paid them for a holiday. We paid them in two tranches. The first tranche was for holiday market, and then the second tranche was for the other programs later on, in the next calendar year. So if you're comfortable with the programs, in the holiday market and are willing to pay the $5,000 for that, then, that makes sense. That makes sense. That can work.
Yes.
That might be a good idea, to split it up.
That's fine with me.
You asked, Your Honor, if that was a motion. I'd like to hear if there's anybody in the public.
Well,
who'd like
I was just
speak
going to say
to us
before we
Before
vote.
we get a motion.
Before we vote, I'd like to have someone come forward. Peter, I'm sorry, Peter, I can't read that. Peter something.
It's Peter Tyus.
Tyus.
Yes.
Okay, there you go.
I am a Camarillo resident. My wife has a more convincing Camarillo accent than I do. I'm the new executive director for Studio Channel Islands, and I was been listening to your discussion, and I would like to provide some clarity, if I could, on the 2 points that that Jan, you raised. Firstly, with the school trips, I believe that's an abnormal selection of. It's an unfortunate and abnormal selection in that normally we'd work more with students within Camarillo. And my plans for the next year are certainly to reach directly into the local schools, not least for the reason that my daughters go to the local schools. When it comes to the beer and wine licenses, those budgets are the full event budget rather than an allocation of Camarillo funds line by line within that budget. So with the budget being larger than the allocation per event, we can certainly identify which strands of work are being supported by the city and make sure that we don't have you buying a round for everybody. Before you go to voting on the motion, I would like to raise some of the outcomes that this support would go to achieving. We've already talked about the engagement of young people in creative activities. We're all aware of the reduction of time that students get within schools for participating in high-quality creative activities. So we're very pleased at the studio that we have professional artists that can provide that activity and work with our schools. The support from the city enables us to have a long-term relationship with those schools, so we can build lessons, we can build contacts, we can build projects. So it's not just a one-off experience. What you're funding with that field trip is the beginning of a relationship with those schools, and we're very pleased to pick that up outside of the funding that the city might provide. We do hope that we enliven the quality of life for everybody in the city by offering these free activities, particularly at the holiday time. And next year within the Arts Alive event. Those activities, we believe, create a very positive perception of the city outside within the wider county, and we hope that that goes some way towards drawing businesses to relocate into Camarillo or to support people to move into this area because they see it as a vibrant and lively place where they would choose to live. And so the last point that I'll make as the clock ticks down is that we would hope that we can become a stronger part within the economy of the city through supporting businesses to relocate and to retain high-quality staff members, but also through playing a stronger role on the boulevard by providing events and activities that draw people in and create a real sense of a dynamic and an exciting place to live and to do business. Thank you.
Other comments? One thing. I got to ask you before you leave, how's your comedy night working?
It's going very well. We had just over 100 people in last time, and the next event will be in mid-December to avoid Thanksgiving and Christmas. Mm-hmm. But yes, it's going very well.
It just seems like I hear people talking about it and thinking that's what we need. We need a comedy place. So thank you.
We can make sure you get an invitation if you like.
Okay. Okay. Any other comments? Motions?
I'll renew my motion.
Could you say
don't
it
know what
again
it
so we
is.
know exactly what it is?
It's to approve the request, subject to the fact that the whatever is the city council determines to be the policy dealing with these public art grants would apply to this one as well as to all the others. So it's, and that I think that's the
Okay,
essence of it.
let me ask.
Clarification.
Yes.
Clarification. Based on my last comments on this,
I liked it.
what I foresee happening with this particular grant this one time is a bifurcated approach. It's going to evolve into that. And so if you want to have them paid for holiday market, their $5,000, I'm going to do that based on their accounting of the program to me to substantiate that $5,000. When we get into cultural arts funding, it can really have a different approach, similar to, for example, community services grants, in terms of, here's our proposal, this is, what the city can, will fund, won't fund, that type of thing. There's an accounting at the end. The rest of their funding that they would be proposing in this proposal would come under the auspices of that system. Is that understood?
Could I just say one thing?
Yes.
Sometimes we're pretty slow at putting together policies, especially when we're starting from scratch. So what happens if we haven't formed a policy by the end of the fiscal year? Or approved
If you
one?
can't do this by the end of the fiscal year, no, seriously.
I've seen sometimes
I-
when we throw them back to committee and they come.
Right. I am confident that this body is going to be able to come up with a viable policy in time. Our goal with this process is to be able to match it to the same schedule as community services grants so that it can be incorporated into the budget. That's our goal. And so right after council makes its appointments for reorganization to policy committee, I'm going to be calendaring a policy committee meeting to start this process.
Okay.
I have a comment to make on the motion. It seems from what I'm hearing that the council's inclined to approve the, was it the $5,000 for the market?
Yes, that's correct.
Request tonight, and then the balance, holiday market, and then the balance of the funds would be subject to the policy that is coming up and would be prepared in the future. And so my recommendation would be to ensure that we're satisfying the public purpose requirements, is that the motion tonight be limited to the $5,000 for the holiday market, and then when you've got your policy together and you know how you're going to spend the balance of the money, you could bring back that item along with the approval of the policy, and it would all be tied together.
That would actually be the cleanest way to do that, to ensure the public purpose of the remainder of their events.
I want to make something clear, because from what I'm hearing, you said to tie it in with the applications for community service grants. However, those are for next year. So it's still going to be different than the community service grants because we're talking about this fiscal year. So we'll have to bring it back and make a decision. Is that correct? On this one only after the policy is adopted.
Correct.
But for the following fiscal year, it would be the same as the community service.
Yeah.
I just want to make,
No, you're absolutely right. There is that timing anomaly with this particular one.
okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
my intent was to approve the entire amount, so I'm going to withdraw my motion from that. I think I've looked over the application. I see no reason why we have to go through this, taking it apart and doing this.
Would someone like to make a different motion?
So there's no motion on the floor then?
No, he took it
The
off
sec-
for.
Oh, we never had a second? Okay.
Well, there's a little bit of clarification what that potential first motion was to
My,
approve the $5,000.
well, my motion was to approve the request for the 29,000 or 27,000, whatever it was.
Just comments.
If that was a motion, I would have seconded it.
Well, I made the motion to approve the request.
Well, you withdrew it.
Well, I did now because apparently it's.
I'm going to try this. I'll make a motion to approve the $5,000 for the holiday market with the direction that this come back to the city council for review of the remainder of the budget. Would you want me to give a time or just, would that,
No, that's sufficient.
No.
just to bring it back
Yes.
For this current year.
for this current year? But
Correct.
not, we can't wait too long because they might need their money, so.
Well, I'll wait to my discussion until you get a second.
Okay.
You haven't gotten a second.
Then, let me clarify my motion. Then I will make a motion to approve the $5,000 for the holiday market and direct staff to bring back the remainder of the request after the first of the year. How about that?
That'd be fine.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. And yet, now your comments, Charlotte.
Okay. I understand that a policy committee meeting will be made at the very beginning, which is going to be January sometime. It's hard to schedule them in December after our meeting on the second Wednesday, although we might meet in December. Staff might be ready to go with the recommendation, but usually, I have never seen a beginning policy go from that first meeting straight to council. We usually bring it back and talk, and because there are various things to consider, especially if this is going to be wrapped in with community service grants.
It's not going to be wrapped in.
No, it'll be a separate process. However, the justification process would be similarly, it'll be built on the same model. So it's not the same calendar, it's not the same process. It'll be close to it, but as soon as we get that policy done, we can bring it forward. We don't have to wait until later on in the year.
Well, just having seen how things go, and I could be wrong. I've been wrong before, but I'm thinking.
Let me offer this.
I'm thinking February is going to be the soonest we get a policy to the council.
And that may be true, but progress will have been made. I can certainly discuss that with the council. By that time, I can iron out any problems or misgivings you may have about ABC licenses, different things like that, and I can bring this independently again, absent a policy. So, I mean, I can work this out.
Okay, I think that's fine. Where I was going with my conversation was, I'd hate for us to delay till May, and they're going all year and not knowing if they're going to get this $29,000 or not.
I honestly don't think it's going to take you until
No,
May to
I don't
get this
either.
done.
I think staff's heard what we're saying.
I absolutely
And I
understand
don't think
what you're
it's gonna
saying.
be
Staff doesn't
delayed.
develop policies, two council members and a committee do, and then bring it to a council.
I think that they'll be rushing this for us.
I think we all heard it.
So
Mr.
we've heard them.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I have the same concerns that Council Member Craven has. I think we're getting into a bureaucratic situation here. And I just hate to see it. We approved this last year. It worked fine. They spent the money. Everything went off fine. I don't know why we have to single this out and say we're going to do something different on it.
I don't think we're singling them out. I think this is how we will begin to handle all of these kind of requests, is my understanding where this policy is going. And I would suggest I don't think it's going to slow them down. And if you go back to the community service grants, they have to pay up front and then get reimbursed. So that's how, look at the hospital, the same thing. They had to wait until they had, that invoice in hand. So this is actually helping them more than you would probably other organizations. So I think we make the commitment that it comes back, no questions, you bring it back to us. It's not like we're not going to address it. But I think from the public standpoint and the perception, I think taking the single one first and not just lumping it all into there makes it cleaner, makes it more, I don't like that word because you hear it so much, but more transparent and more straightforward.
I think the city attorney had some to offer on that too, along that same line.
Exactly.
So we'd have two professionals giving us a little opinion along that same line of thought. We have a motion and we have a second. Any other comments?
Are you asking for the city
Can I make a
attorney to
comment
say
on that?
something?
No,
or
he
not?
did.
He already did.
He
He
already
already
did.
said to use the five, to do
Yeah,
the
I
five.
already expressed my views on this. Yeah.
Can I make a comment?
That's why I'm saying those comments.
Can I
Yes.
make a comment? So the reason why I seconded the motion, it appeared to me that we could give them the $5,000, but once we develop this policy, if they prove that there's more programs, we're not married essentially to the $29,500. We can lessen that, or we can actually increase that if there's more programs that they've got too. So that's the reason why I seconded that motion, that we could have a further look on this.
Right.
All right, any other comments? Please vote. That motion passes 5-0.